Hi, and welcome back to Channel 0X. I'm Mark Landon, and this is Caroline.
Hi, everybody, and we are going to talk about a subject today that is distressing and difficult, but we feel it's important that we do.
This issue with the Border Town comic and Eric Esquivel, it's something that I guess we're all reflecting on because it's something that can affect all of comics and the media in general. This situation, which first came to light in terms of the whole Me Too movement, now we're facing it coming to comics, and it seems that this situation with Eric Esquivel, it's may not end in any kind of a prosecution because this kind of thing is impossible to form a conviction on.
Can I just come in there? I mean, one of my degrees is in law, and I'm sure everybody knows that an unnamed comic writer has come forward to say that Eric Esquivel basically was physically and sexually abusive and perpetrated the worst kind of violatory crimes. And we will also briefly touch, because we don't want to disrespect this complainant and her difficulty, on the absolute hypocrisy of calling people who, for instance, espouse Comicsgate principles as misogynists. And there's also a feeling that there hasn't been the reaction one would have hoped for from the SJW community, that there have been one or two of them that have come forward. But at the moment, it seems to be pretty much a deafening silence. And why don't we brush over the fact that this has been happening? I know DC aren't SJW in the way that the others are, but this guy, as far as I understand and what I know of him, is a self-proclaimed SJW and follows those principles, one of which is treating women with respect and not being a misogynist, serious crime committing person. But the other thing that I wanted to say is, from the legal point of view, it's very difficult, because I'm a believer in that you cannot convict of a serious crime on circumstantial evidence, not something like this. But I also have a very clear feeling from kind of my experience of human nature, my other degrees in psychology, that this person is telling the truth, and this person went through a really bad abusive experience. The difficulty we've got is that she won't get justice for what happened because of the length of time that has elapsed. And as I say, with these very important crimes, I think it's a very dangerous road to be able to convict on circumstantial evidence. I know he's been fired by DC, but when one balance that against what this person went through, to me, it's a difficult situation, particularly I think for people who actually espouse Comicsgate principles and are called misogynistic and
Yeah.
white supremacists and everything else.
I don't think that we can tag everybody who has worked on this comic in any kind of way as a supporter.
No, we
of this
can't. The other two,
situation.
is it Bonvillain and Villabus have both come out and are clearly,
and
it must be incredibly distressing for them, because they're working on something in good faith, and then they find that somebody they work with and trusted has done this. And I think one of them was talking about, the fact that what's happened completely outweighs the joy that I experienced in creating it, which is an awful experience for a creator to be in.
Thankfully, DC have moved pretty fast on this. They have cancelled the book, they've withdrawn it from circulation, and Esquivel is on his way. He is gone.
They've also got a returns policy. If you want to return it, you can.
Yeah. To anybody who was supporting this comic and was enjoying it, well, obviously we don't really support the kind of things that these writers espouse in many ways. And a brief look through this comic, from what I've seen on the net and what I've heard of it, it doesn't really do much to advance humanity coming together in any way. It is a quite divisive book, quite deliberately.
Yeah, I haven't read it. I've heard about it, but I haven't read it.
It gives me a bad feeling, because trying to inverse racism somehow and make it look like as long as you're not white, that it is perfectly okay to hold the rest of the world in contempt.
But the point is, this person who espoused all these principles in such a negative and ugly way has himself proved to be a hypocrite and a perpetrator of the worst kind.
Yeah.
And I would just, racism. And I the bravery of this unnamed person, and I really got my hackles up. I don't often get mad when he said, "Oh, I'm not going to name her because I want to protect her identity. She's a former romantic partner," which I thought was just absolutely sickening.
I don't know if it's wrong to conflate things here, but do you think that there's any connection between the type of book that this is? I know you don't know much about it.
No, I don't. I just know that it really hates white men.
It's a community that live on the border with Mexico, and it is primarily concerned with how badly people are treated by what's considered the MAGA group of people, inhabitants. How they're persecuted, much like it's some kind of like biblical allegory or something, that you've got these heroic illegal immigrants, and they are angelic in every way, or at least that's what the way we're meant to see them. And anyone else who is would try or deign to prohibit their progress into America can be considered the devil's backbone.
Well, that is a wider issue, but I do find it, I'd say at this stage, incredibly interesting. I'd also like to say something else. When Eric came out and basically denied, and it's funny because you said you saw a video on Twitter, which we're going to listen to a statement from him, which appears to have been pulled. But I do know from Twitter that he said, "I didn't want to speak out. I didn't want to speak about over anyone else." Well, basically what that means, Eric, is you spent 2 days with your lawyer begging him to extract you from the La Brea tar pit of crap that you're deservedly in.
Why do you think that he's actually been disingenuous about that? Because I think most people would figure that out for themselves.
Well, I find that interesting.
That's what.
But
there's no immediate.
But a toy designer called Cynthia Nagel, I think, has come out and been brave enough to identify herself and say she's been through the same experience. And I hear at a corporate level that it was known that there were vague rumours of this behaviour, and yet nothing was done about it in a corporation which has a duty of care to its employees in every respect.
Yeah, it's incredible that it seems there was this talk that we're going to deal with this in-house. It's nobody else's concern. It's not a police matter. It's something that we have an obligation to keep a secret and resolve.
Has anybody actually asked the person who's been through this experience what she'd like? How she wants it handled?
Yeah,
because that seems to me to be the most important thing. Have they actually reached out and said, okay, you've disclosed this? As I say, it is circumstantial, but I strongly believe this complaint, and I strongly believe what she's saying.
I'm hoping they have. It seems to be that...
But they haven't publicly done that. They've been very kind of obfuscatory so far, I think.
Any other measure seems to be just lip service. There has to be some sort of justice in this situation, resolution.
Well, it's very, very difficult for the reasons we've discussed about proof. But yeah, there has to be some justice. And I don't know how the person that went through this experience is going to heal and repair.
Do you think this is one and done? This can be dropped now? Do you think that he's paid enough of a price just by being kicked out of DC?
Absolutely not. There is this person who's been through this awful experience. There's also Cynthia Nagel. There are vague rumours about other people. And he is a self-avowed SJW, and SJWs are supposed to have this total iconic state of perfection in their behaviour, and the fact that one of their own is now, as I say, mired in the La Brea tar pit of his own turpitude. No, I absolutely do not think that.
I don't think that anyone else is really going to be encouraged, though, to come forward any faster, because if their own situation reflects this, it mirrors this situation, and they see how companies can pretty much protect the perpetrator, for just ages at a time.
But isn't this a situation where they really need to sit up and take notice? And I think part of that is, I can't remember the name of the woman's video that we listened to earlier. Who was that?
Tristan,
who I thought that was a very good video. She was clearly righteously angry and disgusted by the whole thing. But I think it's people making videos, it's people saying, no, this isn't going to go away, this is what we think. And the more people that do that, I think the more likely it is that they're going to have to sit up and notice, because their own customer base, the people who actually buy these books. I mean, I am hoping that most of those are fundamentally decent people. They're actually going to turn around and say, no, thanks.
Yeah.
We don't want that. We're not a part of that. We're not having that staining us. This is a disgraceful thing. This person needs justice. Or at least total public support.
I would also suggest that as a gesture of goodwill from DC to this person, to this complainant, that maybe every penny that they've made from these books can be sent to some kind of a charity that supports people who are currently going through this kind of similar situation.
That is an idea. I mean, it would depend. I mean, it could go two ways. She could think that's valuable, or she could think that this is money that is besmirched by the fact that this creator is involved, maybe on the basis of the fact that the other two people have both come out and clearly been very distressed. I mean, you know, one of them saying it completely outweighs the joy that creating it and the joy it's brought others. I mean, those two people are clearly in a very difficult situation. But my heart goes out to this person, and I think that companies need to sit up and take notice, because if this is happening within Marvel and Disney and all these other places, these people should not have to think, okay, I have to be silent, I have to go through this, because it's the sheer hypocrisy of the public agenda and of calling Comicsgate as alt-writers and misogynists and all the rest of it.
It kind of does make you wonder just how much projection is going on with a lot of people working within mainstream media, or people allied themselves with it, because
that's a big statement.
Some of them may think that it's simply a ticket to success, simply to ally themselves in direct opposition to people they can tar with a broad brush.
I absolutely think that there's a big sense of it's going to advance my own agenda, but people have to look at their own ethics and their own belief systems when they're faced with this. I mean, you want to get on fine, but you want to be besmirched by your espousing principles, and yet we've got people like these two women who've been through this, and I suspect there are others because of the vague rumour thing, and as you say, there are possibly others within these corporations that espouse SJW principles who haven't felt they can come forward.
Yeah, it really does seem like you know, a light's being shone on this rock that's been lifted, and you know, we're seeing the kind of the dark underbelly. We're seeing these worms squirming now, and you know, trying to flee.
But it's an incredibly disturbing thing.
Yeah,
and for the emotions and what these people have been through.
Unpleasant as it is, it's got to be done. It's not a witch hunt. It is simply our collective responsibility. You know, we're not a collective in many ways, but in one sense, the law.
No, I think when it comes to Comicsgate, I think, I know there's a lot of stuff. We've had our issues to work through with Comicsgate, as a lot of people know. But I think with things like this, I've seen no sign that people who espouse the principles of Comicsgate will not be absolutely united in saying this is utterly disgraceful. And we are going to say it's disgraceful. And I don't think it's even for...
There's so much talk about...
This is a thing. I don't think this is something that Comicsgate are weaponising, as I've heard. I think it's something that, as human beings with certain principles, even though there are divisions, pretty much everybody in the movement or who believe the principles are going to say no, not having it.
There's been so much noise from this side about abuses of privilege, and how privilege itself is something that we need to move beyond in this world. Whether you agree with that or not politically, it's quite clear that anybody can transgress, and whoever your heroes are, you should always keep one eye.
No, but in respect of this thing with DC, I mean, privilege cannot get in the way of basically putting these things. You can't put it right for the people who've been through this. You can't. I think one has to hear, one has to acknowledge. They need, I hope these corporations, I say, will reach out. You can't make it better. You just can't.
And for
you can stop it happening again.
For the record, I'm not suggesting that SJWs are in general, they behave in this way. Most people, thankfully, don't behave in this way.
No, me neither, especially not the comic buying public. But there are executives within these organisations who appear to be privy to this information and espouse one set of principles and also insult people who don't.
But I
want to
think,
buy
but
these
what I'm
books.
concerned is that a lot of people are able to hide within the kind of the protective community that's, which will always form a bulwark of safety for these goings on, simply because they've always said the right things, they've always virtued signal with all the right politics, and they've always spoken out against the very kind of so-called toxic masculinity, which they're now proven to have been exhibiting all this time.
Yeah, and I think Tristan made that point very clearly in her video. I think she really called this guy out as what he is. I think the phrase she used was disgusting human being. I can't remember, but it seems to fit. I mean, I think, there's not much more we can say. I do say that I hope this unnamed person and Cynthia Nagel and anybody else who is within these structures of these corporations who are going through this, I imagine it must take enormous courage to come out and say, this happened to me, however long ago it happened. It must take an unimaginable amount of courage. And I think that courage cannot be denied. I think those people have to be supported in any way they can.
Yeah. And I guess this is just another example of how you've got to judge people by their actions, not simply by
Their
them saying the
rhetoric.
right things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I hope this has been interesting to you. Please let us know what you think. Do you think that this is something which is possibly rife within the comics community?
Please,
Is
within
this...
within the mainstream comics community, and please do comment. This has been a difficult video. It's talking about incredibly distressing experiences that one person's had, another person's talked about, and I'm afraid I suspect that others who have not come forward are having in the mainstream. It has been a difficult thing to talk about, but we felt we needed to air our views on it. Please comment.
Yeah, please weigh in.
Please subscribe if you
this.
want to, you like our videos and we're going to do more, hit the subscribe button, and wishing you all a very pleasant afternoon or evening, and stay safe wherever you are.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.